David.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. We have some issues that we need to discuss this evening in regard to articles and recommendations. I'll let Julian or Heather, which one of you want to go first? We're going to discuss, first of all, the article in regard to the easement. We haven't made a motion yet on that. You want to carry that, Heather?
Sure.
Please.
I have a very brief possible recommendation.
Okay. We just start.
We discussed this very briefly last evening to bring the board up to speed. But back in February, we issued a request for proposals that was required to dispose of land that was advertised in the Central Register in the local paper as required notification process for disposition of public land. We did receive a proposal from NSTAR and Comcast for the installation of a joint hybrid cable at the 11 Mill Road site. Following that, the town engineer reviewed the technical proposal, determined that the technical proposal was complete. We then established the timeframes for public hearing. We've determined that the public hearing will be April 22nd, coming up next week. All of the notifications have been sent out on that, and that has been advertised in the local paper according to the town bylaw. And in the intervening weeks, we had some time to take a look at the price proposals offered by NSTAR and Comcast. If you recall, last year the proposal was a $5,000 easement for the use of that property, which would include both a temporary license agreement for construction and then a permanent easement for the use of the utilities for access to the underground cable. It's a very large-scale project, has already been before the Cape Cod Commission and before the Conservation Commission, but then that's been postponed until the Cape Cod Commission hearing process is moved forward. I know that there's folks that can talk a lot more knowledgeably if there's questions about that, the permitting process, but there are multiple layers, including local, state, regional, and federal licenses and permits that are required, and those are all ongoing for the large-scale project. This is the Falmouth end of the project. So the compensation package that was submitted in the proposal back in February was a $100,000 proposal, variety of packages of both Comcast and NSTAR types of projects. We had some discussions, asked them to reconsider one of the projects that we'd asked for, which includes the drainage work at Mill Road, which has a value of over $136,000. And NSTAR came back and agreed to include that among several projects which I shared with you last evening. In addition, after some additional discussion with Comcast, they proposed an integrated traffic connection to help us integrate our traffic signals. The state signals were not initially included in that. We asked them to consider at least making the drops available if the town can negotiate with the state. They've agreed to offer that as well, bringing the total compensation to the town to $267,000. In addition, that frees up local funds that will not have to be spent on Mill Road with a value of $136,000.
So the $136,000 is in addition to the $100,000?
Is money we won't have to spend to do Mill Road. It's been on our list
Okay.
of projects. In fact, the town engineer is planning to move forward with that this year. And so we won't have to use municipal either Chapter 90 or town funds for that. We'd have NSTAR take on the permitting as well, which is a tremendous value, the permitting, as well as the construction while they're in the field to take that project on. It's a value right in the neighborhood of Mill Road. So tonight, just one brief last comment, is tonight's vote and request of the board of the town meeting is to simply ask them to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into an agreement which could be subject to any conditions that the board sees fit.
I understand on the list what in-kind value is and value of the town.
Sure.
Payment to the town, is that really two $15,000 checks to the town?
No, they will not be. In fact, it's worth more to the town to have these companies provide goods and services to the town because they can provide more for less than we could go out and purchase on our own. So there'll be actual modulators, video cameras, equipment, things to provide the systems that are provided.
But the ones that are listed as payment to the town, why are those different?
Mary O'Keefe,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Senior Manager of Government and Community Relations for Comcast. The reason why we say payment to the town is that we want the town to be able to make the choices of what they want for actual equipment and choose the vendor that they would be working with, as opposed to Comcast doing all that for them. So that's why,
So we'll do the RFP, we'll do the purchasing, but in some ways there will be a very quick check, $15,000 for us to purchase the things.
We haven't talked about this
We haven't,
yet,
no.
but there'll probably be some arrangements with
Okay.
our local cable access corporation, who can also do this better than we can.
Great.
and certainly if it's a payment to Falmouth Community Television to do that on behalf of the town for this project, that's perfectly fine. That way it integrates with what you're already
I
using
understand
and
the distinction
upgrades.
there. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Keep in mind that this is an area where we have the ability to have an open public hearing. We can meet any of the needs in that hearing process of the neighbors and concerns as we move forward. And then that we are the ones who actually end up signing the easement as well.
Correct.
So do I have a motion to enter into a positive motion for town meeting on Article 20?
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. Any further discussion from the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. All right, next issue is in regard to, and folks, we would probably hope that you're available this evening if there's any technical questions we might have. While we're still on that, one of the two of you will make a presentation on that after.
Yes, actually, we have set up with the GIS director these, what are PowerPoint slides, but I'll give you his
Okay.
hard copy.
Only if
So-
we
No,
need
that's fine.
you.
No, we'll be here.
Okay.
Our
No.
intention is, Heather and I have a presentation which we'll make, and then if questions arise, the folks from Comcast and NSTAR can answer it with the information that they've brought.
Yes, no motion.
So hopefully we'll cover the bases.
Okay. The next item is, as the board remembers, the wind turbine article, number 23.
Yeah.
The board.
22.
22. The board remembers that we discussed the other option of putting forward a secondary article that would only require 50% of the vote. The moderator has given us an inclination, if the first motion does not pass, he would entertain the second motion, which would allow for only a 50% vote of the board. So we'd be looking for the board to make a motion, and we would make an alternate motion if in fact we weren't able to gain the 2/3 majority vote on the first article.
And we have two recommendations on the same article?
I believe that we would move forward with our original recommendation. If it failed, then we can make a second recommendation. And that rather than reconsideration, the moderator has given us an inclination that he would accept that immediately after.
So you can have two main motions. If the first one fails, you can have a second substitute motion. Well, Frank, you might have.
Well, I had a email exchange with the moderator on that today, suggesting that the Board of Selectmen might want to submit a second alternate motion if the first one didn't pass. and cited a section of Town Meeting Times as authority for this, and David got back and said that he would entertain a second motion on this article. He did indicate that there has been some precedence in the past for it, although I don't remember it, but he would take it, and the second motion which you are considering presenting would be a motion that would only require a majority vote. Obviously, if the first motion passes, you don't need to do that.
Yes.
I guess the only thing I'm concerned about is the confusion that may ensue on town meeting floor, if not some cries about the moderator's impartiality in this issue, because obviously he's previously expressed a desire or support of removing the turbines and has introduced legislation to that effect. It's good to hear that there's some precedent for it, but I don't remember it either, and I'm wondering is the moderator prepared to provide a sufficient background and explanation so that everyone's going to be comfortable with this, or is this going to be looked at as an attempt to circumvent the
Well,
process?
it's specifically mentioned in Town Meeting
Is
Times
it?
as an option. Yes.
Okay.
There's another scenario, is that we just merely ask for reconsideration. And reconsideration would provide us the opportunity to put forward new information, and the new information would be, this would be a different article, a different recommendation totally. Yes, ma'am?
Well, in thinking about it, if the motion fails, we still are going to the ballot. And if it passes on the ballot, then we go back to town meeting for the funding. So it would seem to me that if it didn't fail, it wouldn't even be necessary to do this, because this just is another something that town meeting is going to have to kind of figure out what it means, because it doesn't really help us in the long run. It doesn't change anything, because if it doesn't pass, and it does pass on the ballot, then we come back anyway with the funding. And if it does pass, then we still have the ballot question as well. I don't know.
But there's one other thing, Pat,
Yeah.
that if we were to merely go to the ballot,
Mhm.
I believe that would be circumventing the democratic process personally. I mean, we could have a discussion about that all night, number one. But number two, this provides us the $100,000 to formulate an RFP, gives us the opportunity to find out whether or not there's resale value of this products. It provides a lot of other scenarios in regard to where just going to the ballot does not.
Would it also provide for other options to be considered? If it fails, if the motion fails?
No.
No,
This
just-
is strictly for this motion.
It's
the
allowed you to pursue
dismantling.
special legislation too.
Right. We would
Which you wouldn't have
participate in
otherwise.
the court. Yep.
Remember, I think if I follow this thread correctly, the main motion on the recommended motion is an authorization to borrow, including, subject to special legislation included in that motion. If you fail to get the 2/3 vote, the article does not pass.
Right.
So in order to get the special legislation, I think you need the
Oh,
alternative.
so this would be to get the special legislation
Yes.
more than anything
Yeah,
else?
right.
Okay, now I get it. All right.
So, do I have a motion that the board would support this as an alternative if the main motion does not pass?
I'd make that motion.
Second.
Motion in a second. Any discussion from the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Unanimous? Okay. And then the last item, Mr. Duffy has, I guess, brought up an issue, maybe we can discuss it tonight or tomorrow.
Well, briefly, if you've got a couple minutes, you may need to think about it overnight. whatever. Last night, as you know, town meeting passed Article 7, which was the amendment to the zoning bylaw about wind turbines. Now, let me give you 2 bits of background information. One, when the wind turbine went up, the building commissioner issued a building permit for Wind 1. The lawsuit that we just tried in Superior Court was about whether or not he was correct in issuing a building permit, or whether the town should have gone to the Board of Appeals for a special permit. We do not have an answer to that lawsuit. It was tried in January and February. It's under advisement. We have no decision. Around that time, I went to, before you, this board, and talked to you about filing an approval not required plan with the planning board, which we did. That froze the zoning for the town, but it only froze the zoning for the use for a windmill on the site. In the meantime, the actual bylaw that the town passed last night severely cut back the size of the windmill from, we have a 1.65 megawatt to a 250 kilowatt, which is much smaller than the one that we have. So we're in a situation now where we have a right to build a windmill, but not the windmill of the size we have. So what I have, my thought, that if we suffer a defeat in the lawsuit and the court orders us to go to the Board of Appeal or to go get a special permit for Wind 1, we will not be able to do so because last night's zoning amendment cut out that option. So we are in a situation where we either have to win the lawsuit or ask town meeting to perhaps reconsider their amendment last night. Now, whether or not reconsideration will make any difference, I don't know, but nobody really seemed to discuss the fact what the consequences of that vote were last night.
Or Frank, we get what the 5 of us have voted for. I mean,
Yeah.
you're arguing
Okay.
against what we're trying to do.
Okay, I'm not arguing for or against. I just want to make sure
I think
everybody
it's very
understands.
confusing for us
Okay.
as a board to put reconsideration to protect our ability to run the turbines when the five of us have voted unanimously and have charged our employees to do everything they can to make that
Okay.
happen.
I'm fine, as long as everybody understands how that works, that's fine.
I mean, in some ways, the information we now have is the town of Falmouth has already made one vote to take those turbines down
Okay.
by passing this bylaw. The town of Falmouth, the town meeting has already voted that the wind turbines we're running right now, they don't want. That they don't want them in this town and they don't think they suit our bylaw. And in some ways, it supports what we have voted for.
Okay.
Okay. If someone wants to reconsider that tomorrow, we surely could think about it. I don't think there's any motion we need. I think we have some consensus here. Everything could change tonight with what happens this evening. Any other business? Make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Oh, God, he's got it, he's over there.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. We'll dispense, we are going to be saying the pledge of allegiance when we go to the town meeting. We'll dispense with that this evening. The agenda calls for a discussion and in regard to any of the items before town meeting. Julian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe just, I've given the board copies of 4 different draft PowerPoints that Heather and I and Jennifer are working on that include the following 4 topics. First, the financial projections, originally presented back in March and updated. That's one of the ones with a black cover and covered, it's copied on 2 sides. That is that remains a work in progress. Heather is looking at a potentially revised and simplified version that we haven't concluded as yet. Also with a black cover is the main motion and explanation. The board adopted last Thursday. That will be handed out to, well, that's already been emailed to all town meeting members that have an email address of record with the clerk, and it's on the town website. But it will be handed individually to town meeting members as they come in for tomorrow evening's meeting. But that is the PowerPoint of it. Also, there's just a 2-pager, front and back, addressing an issue that's been raised at several precinct meetings that we call lost revenue. And then finally, there is a draft piece on information on assessed valuation of homes, complaints received by radial distance from the turbines. So there's a little summary of that in there. So those are 4 items that we, again, are work in progress, and we welcome the board's thoughts and suggestions on that will be happening tomorrow night.
I have one thought, and that is on the lost value. To put $5 million on the value of the turbines, I'm a little concerned about, but I think that's a little bit of an overstatement. Just like when you buy a car that's listed at $20,000, as the second you buy it, you've lost tons of value to it. And the fact that the WTOP said the most that they could sell it for is $500,000, is their estimate, or $600,000. I don't think it's really fair to put that out as a $5 million lost value. That if they don't have value to us, and they don't have value to the outside market, there is not $5 million in value that we're losing. There is the abandoned revenue, certainly, but the value in the turbine itself just is not $5 million.
Excellent.
I tend to agree with you.
Very
Things
helpful.
Or what someone will pay for it.
Right. Not what we paid for.
Right, that's correct.
I mean, what we paid for them is already registered in what we're paying back. And to hit that twice, I worry that that is going to put us up
Be
for...
misleading,
Right.
potentially.
And put us up for strong objections saying, wait a minute, you're putting it on both the plus column and the negative column.
Got it.
Could I just make a comment on that, Mr. Chairman?
Sure, go right ahead, Madam Chair.
I think maybe there's a resale value that might have some sort of an amount attached to it. But then there could be a value that relates to its operations. I mean, we know what it costs to put up there, but it retains a certain value, probably a depreciated value, and maybe that's what we should look at, is a depreciated value and then a resale value. I don't know if that makes any sense. Instead of saying there's no value. I
Well,
mean,
if you
there
don't
is a
run it-
value. What?
If you don't run it, there's no value to it.
Even Weston and Sampson said 200 to 600,000 for both.
Right.
Yeah, I think Doug's talking about the resale value potentially, so we can certainly quote that along with that net revenue that the wind turbine options group also talked about.
Right.
So that's helpful.
Do you want to touch base with those numbers? Because you probably feel more comfortable than anyone in this group with the numbers because you were on that wind turbine options group. Do you want to take a look at that and then you can have some conversation with the town manager,
Sure.
assistant town manager, as we move forward? And then tomorrow night we can come back over that, hopefully come to some conclusions. I spoke with Doug and he's going to address some of those in our presentations as a member of the board, not to preempt you folks by any means.
Oh, that's fine. We just want to supplement wherever we can.
Go ahead.
I have a question. We've identified, and this is within the,
This is on homes.
yeah, the homes and the assessed values of those with complaints, but what's the total assessed value of all the homes within a third of the mile of the turbines?
That's what that number is, it's the 17 million. So if you look on the.
Total valuation of all 41 homes is 17.5 million.
Yes.
Okay.
That's with complaints, though.
No, that's all of them. The complaints are it's just factored, it
Okay,
doesn't.
I see, that's parenthetical.
Correct.
Great.
Do we have, I don't think there were no complaints outside of a third of a mile, is that
Yes,
correct?
there were.
Oh, they were.
There were,
They were scattered.
There are complaints as far as a mile.
as far as a mile. So do we have a number for the assessed value of all the homes within a mile of the turbines? I asked this because...
What you got down to when you got beyond a third of a mile is more 1% or 2% of the total
Right, but...
households
The
complaining.
reason why I'm asking this, because there's been a number of folks who have come forward and said, as an alternative, why aren't we buying homes? And obviously, one of the issues with that situation is that as soon as we say, well, we'll buy anybody who has a complaint, everybody might complain. And so regardless of, whether it's a quarter mile or third mile, if we go, say, out to a mile, because that's as far as we've heard complaints from, then we have to be prepared to buy all the homes within that distance because there's that potential, obviously. There's no way for us to adequately weed out who's being honest about having a problem and who's simply saying, I want to cover my butt before everybody else gets a piece of the pie, which is why I'd like to see the total assessed value of everything within a half mile and a mile.
That might take us a while.
Yeah.
A mile, I'm in a mile. I'm in a mile.
And two of the complainers, most adamant complainers are outside half a mile from our turbines.
Outside of half a mile?
Yeah. I think Todd Drumming and Mark Cool.
But they are much closer to the web turbine.
Right.
We can, Julian, that's, I think with the
You
GIS
can-
system, it's easy to get that information.
Okay, see what we can generate for tomorrow.
There's one other
Put a
issue,
name on the list.
and that issue is the abandoned revenue. I realize that we would be abandoning revenue, but I think this is the maximum abandoned revenue. That's based on the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, maybe you can explain it to me.
That's from the wind turbine option report, the 8.4 million.
Right, but that's based on the fact that it would run 24/7 and that there would be no downtime?
Do you recall that?
I think the number that the residents are using is 7.8 million for abandoned revenue, which is 7.8, 8.4. I think we're close enough that if we call it 8 million, we're in a good argument stage saying, yeah, we can pretty much agree this is what we're talking about as abandoned revenue. Whether there's some curtailment from the DEP from 12 to 3 and some curtailment from Flickr, we're still in the same numbers view of, and that's the number I was going to suggest, is somewhere around 8 million, knowing that there's some uncertainty. And one of my strongest arguments for our point of view is the proposal we're putting forward has no uncertainty. With the exception of it might cost less. That what we're putting forward, we know what the figures are, we know what we're asking the townspeople to pay, and there's no uncertainty. All other options have huge uncertainty of things we just don't know. Granted, the one we're putting forward on paper is going to cost the most on a dollar figure point of view. All other ones are going to be somewhere less, sometimes maybe pretty close from an uncertain point of view, sometimes far away from a strict financial point of view. But the one we're putting forward, we know what it's going to cost, and then we also have to weigh in what are the social costs that the other options provide.
Well, and a buyout might cost even more, like, which is why I asked about the number of homes within the mile, because ultimately,
I think it's unrealistic for the buyout to actually cost more than our option. That, from, I mean, if we really extend it from a hyperbole point of view, if everyone within a half mile wanted to sell, we know that's just not going to happen. And that just isn't going to happen. The people haven't been bothered by them. People like them. They're not troubled at all. That if we get right down to it, there's no way it's going to end up being enough of a sale, and we can't sell the houses for, that's going to come to the cost of taking them down. But then there's the cost for the town, from a personal point of view. And I'm not willing to, I'd rather spend the money than spend the cost of friends and cost of townspeople, and that's my point of view on that, and say, it's worth it.
Go ahead.
My only comment is, or request, that the material was developed based on feedback from precinct meetings. And it was developed that if individual board members would like to respond to those questions from the floor and present these, that certainly is well within a realm of normalcy. If individual board members want to take these on, they're simply prepared because the questions have come up.
And what I would love to is if the lost value and, what was the other word on that page?
Abandoned revenue?
And abandoned revenue, an opportunity comes up, I would be prepared to give a response that I hope would reflect the board's point of view on this issue.
Well, and the one thing I think we have to be careful about is in terms of the buyout, just saying, because if in fact it would ever come to that, there would be legal criteria that would be involved in how
Those are one of the uncertainties.
properties are bought out. I mean, a lot of, there might be medical documentation required, who knows what that would be. So I think that's, we should be as less certain in terms of our opinions on it as possible, because we don't really know.
And the precedent setting that we've never done unfriendly taking.
Exactly.
And there could be additional cost of litigation involved with the buyout.
Oh, yeah.
Just negotiation alone adds quite a bit to the legal costs there whatsoever. Okay, all right. Thank you for putting those together. I'm gonna have Doug speak on that, Pierre, because I think Doug is probably in the best position to comment in regard to what the WTOP had when it comes to finances. I know that Brent and I, who wanted to make some comments during this thing. I don't know whether you do, Pat, at all. David said he did not. So I think Doug would be best served to be the one to comment in regard to the finances. Okay?
I wasn't a math teacher.
Mr. Chairman, we also have some information on the Mill Road piece that Heather has, if it would be agreeable just to begin a little discussion on that. It could continue into tomorrow evening, if that would be the kind of preference of the board. It would not be coming up until tomorrow night at the earliest. So. As the board might recall, we went out with an RFP, and we did receive project response proposals, and Heather and I have had a sit down with Comcast and NSTAR representatives. They were the only respondent. We've had a couple follow-up contacts. Just as a reminder, what is before town meeting, it's indefinitely postponed, as we said. But what is before town meeting is merely to authorize the selectmen to enter into an agreement. It does not approve an agreement. It does not require that an agreement be concluded, but it would authorize you to do it. So you have a couple of choices. Heather and I will summarize this in a moment. We're pretty pleased with the way this has come together. Obviously, ultimately, it's up to the board as to possibilities. But if you would feel comfortable enough to make a recommendation to town meeting, there would still have to be a public hearing held. I think that's tentatively scheduled. It's been scheduled for April 22nd before the board. And a final agreement would have to be reduced to legal language and have to include all the elements that this board feels is important before you would have a chance to sign off on it. So what's before town meeting tomorrow night is really to authorize you to do that. So to the extent that the board might have some comfort with these, we wanted to bring them to you. Heather, would you mind doing maybe a little run through?
Sure, I won't go through all of the dates, but most recently we did issue the public hearing notice, which appeared in Friday's paper, as well as the notices to all the abutters within 300 feet went out last week. That public hearing is scheduled for the 22nd with the Board of Selectmen. In the meantime, NSTAR and Comcast have been involved in a very rigorous permit process. In fact, they were asked to suspend their local permitting until they were done with their DRI review with the Cape Cod Commission. I think it's a DRI. That hearing was held on the 25th of April. Held in March, and they have a follow-up hearing on the 25th of April. They'll have multiple permits with the Conservation Commission, the Army Corps of Engineers, and others. So the project is not fully and completely defined yet. That will be defined by the full regulatory process, and I would expect that any agreement with the town would memorialize that. In fact, you may not even issue it until those are in place. It could be a step that you took. The proposals came in with a compensation value of $100,000, which there were a variety of projects submitted to the town, of which we could choose any number of them up to a in-kind value of $100,000. Upon receipt of that, and after the town engineer reviewed the proposal, determined that the proposal met the technical needs of the town for an RFP. Town manager sat with NSTAR, asked them to add a very significant project. I can just walk through what the projects are. And ultimately, the package of projects that are proposed have a value of $267,000. And also relieve the town of some Chapter 90 dollars that would have been programmed for one of these projects, making those dollars available for something else. So they include several Comcast projects, including an integrated traffic signalization plan for 8 intersections, live drops and equipment for the Herman Foundation Library Meeting Room, as well as the Civil Defense Room. Also wiring back to the town hall for a modulator for live broadcast from the town hall. and equipment for the civil defense room. I think this is duplicated here, but that's both of those projects, the Herman Foundation room and the civil defense room. And then a very significant project that would benefit the project area is a $140,000 design, permitting, and construction projects to integrate the drainage system into the existing structure that the Public Works Department built last year. After talking with them about those projects, we asked them to add, they proposed 4 signals, which were municipal signals, asked if they would at least make the cable ready at the state signals, intersection signals. They added that, agreed to do that. We asked them to consider adding some LED lights in the Main Street area as a pilot program at the town's discretion, of course, and NSTAR added that as well. So it's a fairly complete package in terms of compensation to the town. The parcel itself is valuated at about a little over $450,000. So for an easement, underground easement, the 267 is a reasonable compensation for the use of the property.
Is the easement, was it a permanent easement or a?
There'd be 2 documents. There would be a temporary construction license that would allow the construction activity, and then a permanent underground easement allowing them access for repairs.
Any questions from the board? We don't have to vote this recommendation tonight. I wanted the board to get this information to the board tomorrow night before the meeting.
The idea is that we might consider making a positive motion.
Positive motion. I only did have one question. If the board has some concerns based on our public hearings, we can adjust the work or something of that nature. We still have that ability to do so.
Absolutely.
Okay, it's just not a public hearing to hear people out. It's,
No.
We have some input. Okay.
This board issues the easement.
Okay.
Town meeting only gives you the authority to do it.
Great.
Is there still some more negotiation available to us, or is this pretty much the package that would be voted and we would be going with?
Ultimately, the selectmen would decide on the final package.
Okay.
I think it's fair to say that I thought we had a lot on our plate pushing this forward. It was something at the final hour that I was a little hesitant, and because of that, I think the town manager let them know that, and they came back.
It's a pretty good package, I think.
They came back afterwards because they wanted to see this move in this route. It was not a negotiating tool, it was just because this board has a lot on its plate.
I think it's great. I think it's probably one of the first times that
It's a
we've
long
been
way
that
away from
aggressive.
5,000 originally.
The other thing is that representatives from NSTAR and Comcast will be available tomorrow night in the event that members of this board might have a few follow-up questions, and or if you do decide to bring something to town meeting, they could be there to answer those questions. Again, with the emphasis that all they would be doing is enabling this board to negotiate an agreement, not approving the agreement. That will be up to you.
Okay, all right ahead.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Would the board like us to draft a positive motion for your consideration?
Yes, because I think if we just stay with the indefinite postponement, we've already got that, so if you draft a positive motion.
Is there a reason not to vote a positive motion tonight? What recommendation?
I'll poll the board, do you want a little more time between tonight and tomorrow to do that, or would
If you want to look over the projects or think about them, or talk to NSTAR or Comcast tomorrow.
Pat, what's your thoughts?
I just assume wait till Monday, and really,
You mean
I mean, what's
Tuesday, Monday?
Tuesday? Yeah. I'm
Right.
thinking today's Wednesday.
Tomorrow's fine.
Okay.
But I think to have a draft of a positive motion would be very useful.
Yeah,
We'll do that for you.
Great.
Mr. Chairman, lastly, you need to set a November town meeting date, if that's the pleasure of the board.
What do you have for dates?
We had a suggestion of Tuesday, November 12th, the first day back after Veterans Day. This past year, you met on Tuesday, November 13th. So you could move it back to the following week, the 19th. That's the week before Thanksgiving. So consistent with what you did in the past year, the thought was Tuesday the 12th. If that's your...
Can I ask a question? We never used to do that the week of Veterans Day, not that I have a problem with it, but is there a reason we can't do it the week before?
Is there an election that day?
It's Election Day, yeah. The
oh,
5th.
that's right.
Okay.
The 5th, at least.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's the reason we didn't move on.
Okay. All All right, so do I hear a motion to move?
On November 12th, 2013, for the first day of the annual fall town meeting.
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion from the board? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Okay. I'll look for a motion to adjourn, and we will have a meeting tomorrow evening, same time, same.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.